Back screen here from McCautry.
Here's Asia taking it right to Brianna Jones. Yes, and the foul. Asia lost it on the way to the bucket and then finished.
This is nothing but that sports talk.
And welcome to Nothing But That Sports Talk. I'm Rafique Louison alongside Jackie Powell. And yeah, that's how an MVP performs. What a win for the Las Vegas Aces over the Connecticut Sun in Game 2. I want to give a little bit of your impression on that one.
I mean, I think you just said it. That's how an MVP performs. That performance shows us why A'ja Wilson is 2020's reigning MVP. She came out to play. I just actually watched an Instagram clip from the Las Vegas Aces account, and it showed Bill Laimbeer addressing the whole team post-game. And he made it very clear that he still believes the rest of the team needs to step up. But he was wowed by A'ja Wilson's will. I mean, he gave her such a hard high five after his speech. And you don't really see Bill Laimbeer show a lot of emotion. It was interesting because in the Slack group for the Next, which is where I do a lot of my WNBA coverage, we were talking about the contrast in the coaches' personalities. So you have Kurt Miller of the Sun, who's jumping around. You can hear his voice because there are no fans. You hear him screaming. You hear him yelling. It's not malicious or anything. He's just loud. And then you look at Bill Laimbeer, and he's he doesn't really show emotion while the game goes on. He's very, I don't know if measured is the correct word, but it's quite a contrast. So to sort of see him show emotion in that locker room, I think was a big deal. And the reason the Aces were able to win the game was because A'ja Wilson took the game into her own hands, and they were able to get their offense going through the type of offense that she succeeds in. It also helps that you didn't have Alyssa Thomas for the majority of that game. The combination of her and Beatrice Montpierre really disrupted Wilson in that first game. But when you talk about why A'ja Wilson won the MVP, this is the game that you can show people.
Exactly, because A'ja Wilson is she's creeping closer to being one of the greatest players in WNBA history with the MVP trophy and have a performance like that. She tied the career high with 7 blocks behind only Lisa Leslie, just to name one of the top 3 names in WNBA history. And she said herself in the interview yesterday that she was really honored to be one of the top players amongst Lisa Leslie as somebody that she idolized ever since she was younger. And we're talking about somebody who was a national champion with Arike Ogunbowale back in 2018 and was Rookie of the Year her first year and was an all-star. Man, A'ja Wilson's accomplishing so much in a short period of time. And this is the action that was, minus the fact that they didn't make a single three-pointer in the 4 3-point attempts that they've had. This was the action that was missing in Game 1 when the Thomas sisters literally went off.
I mean, they're not related, but the Thomases, yes.
You don't need. I'm not really saying they're related or anything, but it's just an expression.
Thomases, yes. It's a difference to not have Alyssa Thomas's defensive presence, because not only is she super strong, but she switches really quickly. She's so swift in her movement, but just at the same time, she's super muscular and just a big body. So that might have helped Vegas's confidence a little bit. But this thing was pretty close throughout. I mean, I still think Vegas has a lot of growing and getting better to do. I think you can't see these hesitant performances from some of the pieces that performed so well during the regular season. I was tracking the game for most of it, and I kept seeing, it was Asia's stat line that stood out. And I don't think they're going to be able to win this series by Asia just carrying them. I think you're going to need to have better performances from De'Erica Hamby, consistency from Jackie Young, who I think she has it in her. I think Jackie Young has it in her to take some of that weight off of Asia Wilson. Because I'm watching this game and I'm looking at the box, and I keep thinking about former Bill Laimbeer teams. I keep thinking about the Tina Charles era of the New York Liberty that was led by Bill Laimbeer as the head coach. And it was a very similar type of look in that it was Tina's team and she willed her team to win. And I find that that's not how championships are won in this league. If you look at the last couple of championship teams, you don't have one person just willing you to win. You have a group that is really contributing. And there are a lot of differences between those Liberty teams and this Aces team, because during the regular season, you had people complimenting Asia. You had more consistency from De'Erica Hamby. Jackie Young was producing more consistently than in her rookie season. You had Angel McCoughtry putting up the best numbers she's put up during a regular season. I remember when the season started, it was really the offense went through not only Asia, but Angel as well. Angel could push the tempo, get the ball, drive it in transition, score in transition. And Angel's really strong as well in the paint. That's why their system works for them. But I just find that they're not going to win the championship if it's just Asia Wilson pulling out these performances like this. The reason why the Seattle Storm and even the Minnesota Lynx as well are really dangerous is because they have multiple people who contribute consistently. More so the Storm than the Lynx, but the Lynx do too. Last night, I don't know if you want to talk about this other game, but
yeah, of course we're going to talk about it. But I still have some more to say about the Aces and the Connecticut Sun.
Yeah, go ahead.
In a minute. But as we were saying before, as you alluded to before earlier, it's kind of tough to win this game or a series and stuff when you're not making your 3-pointers. And this is one of the rare occasions where you didn't necessarily need to make your threes to win the game. 3-pointers are there for the reason. They are the key offensive aspect to win a championship. This isn't like before the 3-point line was even invented when WNBA wasn't thought of. 3-point shooting is there for a reason, so you can get more points that you actually need to win the game. And you know what? The Connecticut Sun played well enough to win the game. It's just that fourth quarter, the Aces literally turned it around.
Yeah, for sure. I'm pulling up the stats right now just so I can be able to speak a little bit, I guess, correctly about my observations, because I find that if the Aces do play their game and they do play with the energy that Bill Laimbeer knows that they can play with, I don't think 3-pointers are going to be the issue. They've beaten the Storm before. They've beaten a team that is so reliant on the 3-pointer. But I think I just wonder, so in looking at the stats here, so the Aces had, I guess turnovers weren't an issue either. They had 12 turnovers, which is probably more than Bill Laimbeer would want to begin with. But then the Sun had 17. I guess maybe they need some. It's been frustrating to see Kayla McBride sort of not be as sharp from there, but I think we have to remember that McBride is a scorer. She's not just a 3-point shooter. She's been in all of those 3-point shooting contests, but she's a scorer. So she's another one. How could I forget about Kayla McBride? She's another one who needs to come out and who needs to score consistently. That takes the weight off of Asia Wilson if you have Kayla McBride, coming off of screens, taking jumpers. I think that's what they need too. Obviously, this team, you play through Asia Wilson, of course, but I just don't think it's necessarily realistic to believe that she can score like how she did through double and triple teams every single night. And again, I bring up Tina Charles because that's what Tina Charles did. So Asia just needs help. And tonight they were able to, Asia had enough gusto to will her team to that win. But I'm sorry that I'm repeating myself. I just think that to win this series, people have to step up. I think Bill knows that. I think the team knows it, but it's hard to execute. And something I think worth noting is that a lot of the guards on the Aces are not as experienced. So you think about Jackie Young's playoff experience, you think about Caleb McBride's playoff experience, Lindsay Allen's playoff experience. The most experienced people on this team are Angel McCoughtry, I think Carolyn Swords, and possibly
Sugar Rogers, a former Liberty herself. I mean, you almost ignore the fact that she's even on the roster. I mean, you don't rarely even see much from her when she came to the bubble. But you know what? Her presence and her experience in the playoffs is what helped the Aces get to where they are right now. But there's no getting past the fact that they're not making their 3-point shots, which is what killed them in game one. They won. They made one 3-pointer in the game that they lost, but they didn't hit any of the 3-point shots that they only took, which is like 4 in the game that they won. And funny enough, they're more focused on the inside game, and that's fine. But when it came down to having to make your 3-pointers and having to take more 3-point attempts against a team that's literally done a great job of defending the 3-point land in the past 3 games, what are you going to think then?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think that's not the Aces' identity. They don't take a lot of 3-point shots. Most of their points are in the paint because they know they have the advantage in the paint. They're really good on transition. The Aces are all about defense. They're all about turning the defense they create into offense. And that's why I think this matchup is really good and really fun to watch, because you have 2 teams that are just so solid on defense. So I'm going to make a prediction in that. I think what we saw last night and just how it was punch after punch, very close until the very last quarter, I think that's what we're going to see through the rest of the series. I don't know if Asia Wilson's going to come out like that every night, but in terms of just looking at how these teams are built and how they function, and that they are both built on a strong defensive identity, that to me means you're going to see a lot of closer games. You're going to see their styles of play clash because they're just so similar.
Yeah, and to think that the Las Vegas Aces cleaned up the Connecticut Sun like it was nothing in their 2 regular season matchups between each other. Now the Connecticut Sun, they're coming off 2 consecutive games of winning by at least 13 points against the Sky and the Los Angeles Sparks, a team they defeated in the playoffs the previous year, and they win the first game in the same fashion. And they're showing that they can hold their own against Aces. They can hold their own. And we're talking about a Connecticut Sun team that was in the finals last year. I mean, yeah, they did a lot in the seeding, but you can't ignore the fact that they're a WNBA finals team. You just can't. And my prediction is, I think the Aces are still going to take them out, but it's going to take it 5 games at most. 5 games, actually, because, it's tied at 1. They're guaranteed a game 4. But with your prediction, you still think the Aces are going to completely win the series, or?
It's really tough. I think I'd be able to give a more accurate prediction, or at least a more confident prediction, after we see what happens in game 3. But I do agree with you. I think this is going to 5 games. There's no way that this game doesn't go to 5 games. I could say, yeah, Asia Wilson wills her team to the finals. I could imagine that. But also I could imagine DeWanna Bonner willing the Connecticut Sun And just that playoff experience really taking over on the Sun. I mean, I think we forget how much playoff experience is on the Sun. And that's partly why we're seeing them peak at this moment. So, Jasmine Thomas, she made it to the finals last season. Alyssa Thomas, although she got injured and what happened really doesn't look good, and she probably won't return in this series. DeWanna Bonner has a ton of playoff experience. And the people they brought in Breon January, who has also a ton of playoff experience. So I think that's part of what we're seeing here, which is you've got a front court that is just so experienced, in January and Jasmine Thomas, matching up against some of these younger players in, Jackie Young, Lindsay Allen, and even Kayla McBride. I mean, you do consider Kayla McBride to be a quote unquote veteran, but I mean, she really, when she was on the San Antonio Silver Stars, I believe, that team wasn't making the playoffs. Her first playoff year was in 2019, which was last season. So I think I'd be able to give you a better prediction after game 3. But I think what it's going to come down to is who's going to want it more, because I think both teams are capable of moving on. But which team is going to have the most consistent performances, and which team is going to have, I guess, the most folks with that will.
You got a point on that one. But and to close out this conversation about the Connecticut Sun Aces, it all comes down to pretty much the better defending, not the better three-point shooting. And this is one of the series.
Couldn't agree more.
Let's transition to the Seattle Storm and the Minnesota Lynx. How can you sleep on that game with a shot? Although, when looking at that game-winning layup, it did look like it didn't count. But when you look at the replay, I was like, yep, it counted. Another miracle for the Seattle Storm. Like, what were your impressions on that game?
Oh, that game felt really emotional to me for the Storm. I could just tell that, and they admitted this in post-game last night, they weren't completely 100% themselves. They were a little sluggish. And that was just because of the emotions that they had been through in the past 48 hours with this inconclusive COVID testing. And that takes a toll. That takes a considerable toll. They weren't able to all practice together during those 48 hours. And they hadn't played in almost 10 days. So for them to just really grit it out, which you don't really see the Storm as this gritty team. You see them as a really talented and quick team, but they were gritty at the end because the Lynx had the momentum in the fourth. They seriously did. But I don't think what we saw last night is the true identity of the Seattle Storm. Then again, do I think the Minnesota Lynx are better than they were in the middle of the season? Sure. But I'm going to have to see. I think game 2 is going to be different. I think it's going to be a lot different. But from a basketball standpoint and from just watching a game, it was a great game to watch. It was back and forth, back and forth. And as we were saying before, this matchup also really, I guess, highlights the identities of these teams, which is they stretch you out. They both stretch you out. They both can hit a lot of three-point shots. In the first quarter, I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I think there was some sort of record broken for most three-point shots in one quarter. I got to check on that. But I think the takeaway was in the first quarter, we saw that these two teams can both stretch you out, and they have similarities as well, just like with the Sun and the Aces. Those were my impressions there. Also, you just can't. I mean, Alicia Clark, she's going to be a threat. Everyone in that starting 5 is a threat for Seattle. So anyone can make that play.
Well, we're so surprised. I mean, we're talking about two franchises. Both of them combined for 8 of the last 10 WNBA Finals appearances. Minnesota is undefeated. Seattle's undefeated. All of them undefeated in the finals. I mean, what more can you say about the Minnesota Lynx that hasn't been said? I mean, they had Sylvia Fowles, who broke the rebounding record earlier this year, but she's been out because of the injury. But Minnesota still were good enough for a top 4 spot. Not to mention they got Crystal Dangerfield, who was Rookie of the Year. What are your impressions on Crystal Dangerfield being Rookie of the Year for that team? The first rounder to pull off that award.
I mean, it was totally well-deserved because Crystal was basically in her own lane in terms of the impact she had on her team and her consistency. It was the type of thing where when we were after the draft in April and May and June-ish, when the team sort of did their virtual Zoom training camp, Cheryl was quoted, or Coach Reeve was quoted to say that she didn't think Crystal would be playing a lot. She didn't think that there'd be a lot of time for her. But that was the complete opposite of what happened. I mean, you have a concussion to Lexi Brown. Odyssey Sims came in late. They didn't even know if Odyssey Sims was going to be ready to go. But Crystal's numbers and where this team is right now, it speaks for itself. Although I do think that she is a bit intimidated by the playoffs. I think it's clear. I think the fact that in the elimination game against the Mercury, she was hesitant in that first half. Then the fourth quarter, she got her confidence and exploded. Last night, that didn't really happen. She didn't get her confidence and then get into her full stride because the Seattle defense is that good.
It really is. And you know what? I forgot to mention the fact that they lost 1 year against the Los Angeles Sparks. Too bad you don't have to worry about them, even though you did redeem yourself the very next season. I forgot to mention that earlier in the conversation. But yeah, we talked, like you mentioned before, the Seattle Storm, the chemistry that Breanna Stewart and Sue Bird had for years and years just continued to thrive. And that's what you were saying?
Yeah, what's really interesting about the Storm is their chemistry and how well they know each other. That fuels how well they do. Their offense is really structured on being able to read each other. It's very read and react. And New York Liberty fans, if you're listening, that may sound familiar. Well, it is. It's sort of what the Liberty are trying to get to. But the Storm, their system is so set in place. And it's, I mean, these people have been playing with each other for a long time. But I must say, in the fourth quarter, I did find that the Storm were a bit stagnant. They weren't moving as much. And there were those, ISO one-on-ones with Stewie and Nafisa Collier. And Collier blocked her 3 times in a row. And I kept thinking, I was like, should Stewie really, keep taking these shots if she's just getting stuffed? But I mean, they believe in her. They're confident in Breanna Stewart, and they play through Breanna Stewart. But Coach Klopp wasn't pleased. I mean, he was happy to get a W, but he was like, this is not, we're not going to be able to win the series if we play like this. And I agree. So I expect that the Storm are going to go back into the film room now that their anxieties are a little bit calmer because of what went on with the COVID testing. And I'll be curious to see how they come out in game 2. But I think it's going to be a lot different. I think their energy was a little down, I thought.
Yeah, it could go either way. But get to your prediction. Who you think is going to win? Do you think the Seattle Storm will win the final 2 games of the series, or will Minnesota turn it around and make it 3-1 or 3-2?
That's really tough. It depends how quickly Seattle regains its identity or comes back into who they are. If it takes a little longer, if they're still a little sluggish in game 2, I could see the Lynx continuing what they built upon. This one, I'm less confident about it going to 5 games, but I'd say 4 games. I think that sounds fair to me. I think the Lynx are going to play really hard. I think they're going to be able to pull a game out. I think it's also harder to make these predictions because we're at this neutral site, or they are at this neutral site. There isn't that home court advantage. There aren't fans. That's not a factor that we consider. It's more who's going to be energized, which team is going to be emotionally in it. And those are very arbitrary controllables. Those are factors that, from us, the outside looking in, is very difficult to be able to determine. It's like, okay, well, who's going to show up? How do we know that this person's going to show up? Instead of saying, well, oh, there's home court advantage. How does this team do at home or not? So it's the Webble season makes predictions harder in my mind, because it really is all dependent on who shows up. Because even with the Storm, if they're not making their 3-point shots, if they are aggressive on defense, then they're still hard to stop. And also the Storm turned it over much more than they usually do. The Lynx usually turn the ball over a ton. That is an Achilles heel of this team, and even the team from last year that Cheryl Reeve is still trying to fix. But if the Storm can make it back to their identity and to who we know them to be, it depends on how long it takes for them to get there. So I say that the Storm win this one in 4.
Yeah, that could be a huge possibility. But to close out this conversation, as far as the Lynx and Storm matchup, what are your impressions about Cheryl Reeve as she was named the Coach of the Year?
Oh, Coach Reeve. I mean, I think this is something on Twitter that we've been saying. And it started last year when we saw how Cheryl responded to a year without Maya Moore. Everyone was freaking out. Like, oh my God, the old Lynx dynasty, it's not going to be able to survive. What are we going to do? And Reeve was able to, as the GM as well, pull together a group that was successful. I think it's always a combination of really good coaching plus talent. And so I think that's what you have on the Lynx. You have Nafisa Collier, who's really talented, but she also has a really thorough and a really masterful coach in Cheryl Reeve, who has been doing this so long and knows how to win. So I thought it was so well-deserved, because this was supposed to be a rebuilding year. Rebuilding years don't mean that, you make it to the semifinals. But for Cheryl Reeve, that's what it means. It means she's going to put together a team every year that is going to be competitive. That's who Cheryl Reeve is. That's what she has made the Minnesota Lynx organization to be. The team she puts together, they're going to be competitive. That's what we say on Twitter. Don't count out Cheryl Reeve. And so this is so well deserved. People were talking about Bill Lambier to possibly win Coach of the Year. And I just didn't think that was fair, because he had so much more talent to work with. I mean, when you have a team with A'ja Wilson, you have De'Arca Hamby, you have Angel McCoughtry, Cheryl Reeve has a bit of a grittier bunch. You didn't know you were going to get the production you got out of Damiris Dantas. You didn't know you were going to get the production that you got out of Bridget Carlton, who had quite a game last night. You also didn't know that Crystal Dangerfield would be such a threat. So it's a combination of the talent existing plus the incredible coaching, really. And the staff she put together, too. They deserve that credit as well. Katie Smith, who is now the single assistant down with Coach Reeve, because Planette Pearson and Rebecca Brunson had to leave the Webble, one for personal reasons, another, I think it was both for personal type reasons, but so well deserved. That's how I'll conclude it. So well deserved.
Yeah, I mean, it was about time a different coach went anyway. I mean, to close out this conversation, I consider Sherelle Reeve the Craig Popovich of this WNBA dynasty in the Minnesota Lynx.
Yeah, I mean, people have said that the dynasty. I mean, I could argue that the dynasty did end, but the competitiveness has not ended. The Lynx are going to be competitive every single year. That's just something that I think we all know and we all accept. I think it's going to take a couple of years to get back into the finals, but I mean, they come out and play hard and they are relatively successful each season. And it is very hard to do that. So the way in which Coach Reeve is able to take the ingredients and the roster she has and use those pieces and help those pieces unlock their potential, it's impressive. She has a bit of a player development acumen. She does. And I think that's what it's about. There are coaches in this league that are more focused on player development than others. And I think Reeve is, because she's able to take a younger group and get them to this point. You also see that with Kurt Miller. He's very development heavy as well. He's very teaching oriented. So
yeah, I hope Walt Hawkins is taking notes from this because.
Oh, I'm sure he is. There's a Netflix documentary all about coaching that Don Staley is in that I bet you he will watch. But also, shout out to Walt Hopkins. I believe he deserves some much needed rest, physical and emotional rest. But also, I know he loves basketball, so I'm sure he's not completely avoiding watching the playoffs. But he does deserve a rest.
It's really not. And the one last topic to talk about before we conclude this whole Emperor Zone in general, we kind of mentioned Maya Moore. Well, it's not like Maya Moore leaving was going to affect the Minnesota Lynx franchise in any way, especially when she comes back. Minnesota's going to be back in the championship mountain eventually. I mean, she left because she used all the money that she earned during her WNBA career to release the man who was wrongfully arrested that she eventually married. What do you think about that impression in storytelling from Maya Moore?
I mean, I don't know if she used all of the money that she earned as a basketball player.
Not all the money, but yeah.
I mean, I'm sure she used some of it to acquire the legal resources that she did. But a colleague and someone I know, Katie Barnes, has been on the Maya Moore beat for a long time. Katie went out to Missouri to that courtroom and saw some of the proceedings take place and saw the emotion in Maya Moore's eyes. And we were both taken aback by the fact that they're married. But to be honest, it doesn't, that fact and the fact that there was a romance involved, that doesn't take away at all from what Maya Moore did. It just doesn't. It's as simple as that. She put her career on the line to stand up for what was right. She put her career on the line to learn about this country and its very flawed criminal justice system. She did something way outside of herself. She put herself through a lot of emotional anguish that she didn't have to, but she did. So, and I mean, Jonathan Irons seems like not only a romantic partner for however long, or for life rather, but he seems like someone who she's going to be involved with when it comes to her activism and when it comes to right now getting out the vote. They're involved in a campaign with voting. So I think they both have a similar spirit in that they want to work for change in this country. They want to help other people who have been through what Jonathan's been through. So it's a brilliant story. Maya Moore's story will always be a brilliant story. That was just an interesting twist. Like, people were saying, oh, this sounds like some sort of Disney movie that's going to be made, or something of that sort, or some sort of like a fictional biopic on Maya Moore. I could see it. I definitely could, with some sort of fairy tale-ish ending. But amid all of that, as Katie said in a recent opinion column that they wrote about Maya Moore and about the announcement of her marriage, that the romance, this new piece, it doesn't take away from what she did whatsoever. It doesn't, not at all.
I mean, I never really expected Maya Moore to marry a man that did time in prison, but this storyline is understandable because jail time or not, it just goes to show that Black Lives Matter, regardless of the background that you grew up in. This is what a lot of people don't realize. Yes, people have criminal activities. There's a lot of people that are not human beings. There are a lot of people that are not nice. But if you really get to know the person outside of the background that you have, you get to know why his life matters as much as yours to the human population. That's what Maya Moore really did when she went out her way to release Jonathan Isaac. He just, that's how love conquers all. Just like this podcast episode conquers all as we come to a conclusion. Thank you for stopping by, Jackie Powell, and I hope to get you back in when we continue discussing the 2020 WNBA playoffs.
Absolutely, Rafique. This was fun. I mean, we'll have to see what happens. I think both game threes are going to be pivotal. They're going to be pivotal points where it's going to say, okay, where is this series going to go? So I'm excited. And thanks again.
And to all the big ballers out there, get your head in the game, and Black Lives Matter.